So, we only have, one life, one chance to make the most of our world, and the reality is we can fumble that so easily and so stupidly and choose to cry over spilled milk. Canada ranks just a little higher than the US for global happiness, but what does that really mean? Well, self-fulfillment is built on our culture and built on what you believe a worthwhile task or lifestyle is. It might leave you questioning what happened to all your options. I don't think you feel like you have a great choice in what makes you happy, and why is my occupational environment the way it is? And I want to talk about how it wasn't always this way and how colonization and culture loss has changed what we value and what makes us happy when it comes to occupation. And let's start with ourselves. You wake up, you go to work, you repeat, and it's kind of lonely and kind of bland. And if we're being honest, there's no mating, there's no hunting, there's no leisure time, nothing that our ancestors would have been doing, and there's nothing in common between what bring them joy and what made you happy. Maybe beyond the sleep. And that's because of our occupational environment. And it shapes how you smile, it shapes what makes you happy, it shapes what makes you cry, and it shapes how you perceive every problem. If your culture was different, you might not even believe in problems the same way that I do. It pisses me off how unlucky I am to have been born into a system where fulfillment is tied to productivity or success. So the simpler joys, like just finding a meal for the day or keeping my home clean. I'm in a system where I don't have a nice house, or if I'm not doing well, it's somehow considered bad, and I have to compete against everyone else for these resources. We can all agree that being able to live in a farm in the Appalachian trails, fear ghosts, and think moons are lucky is a pretty fun lifestyle in its own unique ways to play life, and we live what we perceive and interpret for our own value system. From even a selfish point of view, it's nice to maintain these options to opt for a simpler, more fulfilling occupational belief system. In Japan, they have a term called karoshi, which stands for working yourself to death, alongside a term called karajatsu, which means suicide from overwork. That's not good. While on the other hand, just 1% of Danish employees work more than 50 hours a week, and they devote 15.7 hours a day to personal and leisure time. We should be more critical of what cultures can bring to the table for us, especially when it comes to self-worth and mental health, especially from an actualization standpoint. Look at the First Nations. Before residential schools, their occupational systems revolved around harmony to land, community rules, spiritual practices tied to their environment. A large variety of roles and occupations for these practices existed because they came with the culture. And you're very unlikely to experience karoshi with such a balanced occupational framework. But we don't use their occupations. And the Canada Truth and Reconciliation Commission tells of how we use residential schools to perform cultural genocide. We forcefully remove their children, ban their languages, replace their traditional knowledge with European labor systems. And its final report describes that this was a deliberate attempt to destroy Indigenous cultures and identities. Survivors were stripped of the occupations that give their lives meaning, be it hunting, storytelling, crafting, or healing. All of these different practices and beliefs, as well as occupations, gone. And when you destroy the meaningful occupations of groups, what happens next is pretty obvious. Generational trauma, substance abuse, depression, and suicide. You took away their entire meaning in life, and children who returned home couldn't reconnect with their families or cultures, leaving them isolated and adrift in a system that denied their own worth. The TRC linked this directly to Canada's ongoing Indigenous mental health crisis. And of course, it's no wonder that the Homeless Hub Canada mentions how a 2021 census found that 35% of homeless individuals identified as Indigenous in Canada, and these schools operated until 1996. That's way too close to now. That's horrible. And these survivors and their descendants are left navigating a system where success means assimilating to a system that completely has all arbitrary values that are unrelated to their own natural ones and the ones they actually care about. It's not just Canada. Christianity replaced the tradition and occupations of the Greeks, removing occupations even as simple as an oracle, fortune teller, caretakers, all gone because of religious change. And the Egyptians lost their formal roles and systems due to the colonization of Islam. And the global replacement of spiritual practice of foreign religion means that occupation systems that made sense for local environments and local peoples, communal farming, seasonal migrations, were erased, and the wellness that came with them lost. Reconciliation isn't about guilt, it's about restoration. The TRC's 94 calls to action demand Canada rebuild Indigenous occupational systems, revive languages, bring back land-based education and self-governance. Why? Because happiness isn't universal. For some, it's a clean home or shared meal, but for others, it's stewardship of your land. Cultural genocide robs you of even being able to make that choice. So ask yourself, why do we accept a system where fulfillment is based on your wealth and not meaning? And why do we let arbitrary beliefs dictate who thrives? The TRC called residential schools cultural genocide, but genocide doesn't kill people. It also kills occupations. And research found that between 1991 and 2001, nearly 2.3 thousand working people in Canada lost their lives. And all these deaths were related to occupation. We should not be losing lives to something as arbitrary as concepts of self-fulfillment. And keeping these simpler, more successful occupational systems can help us address these problems. These examples were in the past, however, and that brings us to why it's important today. And we can't lose these lifestyles and value systems from our repertoires. And I would love to say that we've stopped a loss of these, but we haven't. And the fight to preserve cultures is very alive. We aren't just fighting the sands of times. And in particular, look at the Uyghur population of China. The BBC reported they're being forcefully sent to re-education camps to assimilate them culturally, forcing new language, new traditions, and being forced into new labor systems, using brutal and deadly force. If this reminds you of residential schools, it should. We know this is wrong. We know people are getting killed and raped, and we've seen this all again. Even if the Uyghurs survive, this will destroy their cultural, linguistic, and traditional knowledge. For the sake of a better occupational and kinder future for us all, I urge you to reconsider the brands you support and the products you buy. Traditional belief systems are a rare resource in our modern world. We must try our best to keep these people alive, because when the people behind a culture are broken, the task of picking up those pieces gets harder every day we wait. And rebuilding them is not quite as easy as just keeping them in place where they were. Thank you.